All right. If you're an architect practicing in Goa, you know the Goa Land Development and Building Construction Regulations of 2010 can feel like a real beast. So in this explainer, we're going to demystify that rulebook. We're going to give you a clear, practical guide to getting your plans approved. Honestly, let's just make your life a little bit easier.
You know the feeling, right? You've got this amazing creative vision, but then you have to navigate this maze of paperwork and regulations to get a plan approved. It can feel like a totally different job sometimes.
So let's get right into it. The whole point here is to give you a clear, practical roadmap through the Goa Land Development and Building Construction Regulations, the GLDBCR. We're going to turn that dense, complicated rulebook into a real tactical advantage for your projects.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the foundational rules, then define the key players and terms you absolutely have to know. We'll get into zoning, walk through the exact submission process, tackle Goa's unique special areas, and finally, get you across the finish line to occupancy. Let's dive in.
Okay, first things first. Let's talk about the foundation. Every single project you design, every plan you submit, it's all governed by one primary document. And this is it. The Goa Land Development and Building Construction Regulations 2010. This whole thing came out of the Act of 2008, and it is the official rulebook for everything. Knowing this document isn't just about compliance, It's about speaking the same language as the authorities and basically streamlining every single step of your project.
Now, to navigate any system, you've got to know the lingo and who the key players are. So let's break down the essential vocabulary you're going to be using pretty much every single day.
First up, the competent authority. Think of this as your gatekeeper. Depending on where your project is, this could be a municipal council, a village panchayat, or a PDA. They're the ones who give the final yes or no on your permissions and clearances. Knowing exactly who you're dealing with from day one is step one for any successful submission.
FAR, floor area ratio. This is the magic number, right? It dictates the sheer scale of what you can build. It's really just a simple ratio. Your total floor area divided by your plot area. So, for example, if you've got a 1,000 square meter plot and the FAR is 80, you can build a max of 800 square meters of floor area. This calculation is absolutely fundamental to your entire design concept.
Next up is coverage. Now, don't get this mixed up with FAR. Coverage is different. It controls how much of the actual ground your building's footprint can physically cover. This is the rule that makes sure every plot has enough open space for things like light, air, and landscaping. It's what stops people from just building on every last inch of a plot.
And of course, you're not in this alone. A successful project requires a whole certified team. The regulations are very specific about these key roles, from the town planner to the structural engineer. Each of their signatures is needed at different points to basically vouch for the project's integrity. Okay, this next point is absolutely 100% critical for any architect working in Goa. The location of your plot, its designated zone, will completely determine what and how you can build.
The GLDBCR splits land into two main types, regular and special zones. Regular zones, like settlement or commercial, they have a pretty straightforward set of rules for FAR and height. But if your project is in a special zone, like a conservation area or a coastal zone, well, you're playing a whole different ballgame. These spots have an extra layer of really strict rules and need separate prior clearances.
Now have a look at this. This is where it gets really practical. This is pulled straight from the regulations for village panchayat areas. Just look at the difference. A plot under 4,000 square meters in a VP1 zone gets an FAR of 80. But that same size plot in a VP2 zone, it only gets 60. This just shows you perfectly how zoning and plot size directly hammer your design from the very first line you draw. Okay, so we know the rules. We know the terms. Now let's get down to brass tacks preparing and submitting your application package so you can get that smooth approval.
You can really break the process down into 4 clear steps. First, you have to be meticulous about gathering every single document. Then, you prepare your plans using all the correct standard notations. After that, you make sure everything is properly signed and authenticated. And finally, you submit the whole package to the right competent authority.
Look, to avoid getting rejected right out of the gate, your submission has to be complete. Regulation 3.2 is your best friend here. Key things you need: a detailed site plan, all your building plans and sections, service plans for drainage, a clear parking layout, and critical documents like the conversion synod and a cost certificate. Missing even one of these can stop your project cold.
Now here is a pro tip that can make a surprisingly huge difference: color coding. The regulations are super explicit about what colors to use for different things on your plans. Proposed work has to be in red, open spaces in green, drainage in yellow, and so on. This isn't just to make it look nice, it's a mandatory requirement that makes your plans instantly readable for the officer who's reviewing them.
This detail is especially important on your site plan. This sketch is taken right out of the regulations and it shows you exactly what they need to see. You have to clearly mark the right-of-way, the R/W, and then from there establish your building line and your setbacks. Getting this part wrong is honestly one of the most common reasons for getting queries and delays.
Okay, now let's talk about one of the most complex parts of practicing in Goa, trying to develop in one of its many protected and special zones.
So here's the absolute bottom line on this. For projects in these special areas, the approvals are sequential and they are completely non-negotiable. If your site is in a CRZ, you need approval from the Coastal Zone Management Authority before you can move forward. If it's a conservation area, the Conservation Committee has to give its opinion. And if you're near archaeological sites, an NOC from the ASI is a must. Trying to bypass these will get you a guaranteed rejection.
Getting that development permission is a massive milestone, but it's not the end of the story. Let's talk about the final steps that take you from a construction site to a finished, usable building.
This quote from the regulations is a really stark reminder. The entire process, from the very beginning to the very end, is strictly governed by the written rules. Every decision the authority makes has to be justified by what's in this document. It just hammers home how important it is to know your regulations inside and out.
And this right here is the final prize, the occupancy certificate. After all the construction is done, the competent authority comes out for a final site inspection. If everything matches the plans you got approved and it all complies with the rules, they issue this certificate. This is the official green light that legally lets people occupy and use the building. Without it, your project just isn't finished.
So, we've walked through the whole rulebook, from the basic definitions to that final certificate. These regulations aren't just obstacles, you know? They're the actual framework where creative and responsible development happens. So the real question is, now that you're armed with this knowledge, how are you going to use it to design and build the future of Goa?